This week's guest, Paul Vaillancourt.
That guy's okay. He's all right.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know Paul, he's a longtime improviser. I've known you for, 20 years, probably?
Oh, my God. At least, Miles. I've been out here for almost 20 years, and I knew you for a few years before that, yeah.
Wow. Actually, Paul wrote a book called The Triangle of the Scene.
That is correct.
Right?
Available on iTunes and Kindle.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Actually, I actually tried to buy that.
Oh.
At one point.
I appreciate your efforts.
And something screwed me up, and then I was trying to read it for free.
Oh, great.
Because I'm cheap. No, but I was reading some of it, and what it got me thinking was that actually can I remember Paul was a student of mine like a long time ago when I was much more complex, I would say. Complicated?
Okay. Sure, let's say.
Oh, yeah. What I'm remembering is that thing I came up with that wound up looking like, we called it the vagina of comedy because it was a diagram.
Yes.
It was so incredibly involved.
Yes. Oh, it was definitely heady. Yes. I guess I would say maybe you're more heady back then.
Yes. I was more heady. It
was a show that had to be explained to the cast with a diagram.
Yes.
Yeah, Think Loud in the Idiot Box. That was the one, right?
Think Loud in the Idiot Box,
yeah.
which, as I recall, like to my satisfaction, was done well like twice.
Sure, you were very exacting.
I was very exacting, but I mean, I remember the one time when it worked, I was like, that's it. Let's never do this again, because it was like almost impossible to pull off. But what that made me think of was like, and I think you're heady too, right?
I certainly can go that direction. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as far as like, and I don't mean in your play, but in your examination of improvisation.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Because I was thinking like, I was reading some of the things in the book, and I was like, wow, this is looking like math. This is looking.
Yes, I think so, because I think that sort of at its most basic level, what the aim of the book was to sort of give people a simple, replicable set of tools that they can use over and over again. Like not tricks and not formulas, none of that stuff, but like tools. Like any tool, you can use that tool to build whatever you want or make whatever you want. But I think at its very basic, the craft of improv has a certain mathematics to it, that there's simple things that like make a scene work and make a scene not work. And I think that I tell people this all the time, because I talk about improv all the time and very little else. And people say, well, can anyone learn to improvise? And I feel very strongly that anyone can learn the craft of improv, like how to do it. And then some people can sort of take that to the next level to ascend to the art of improv. That's my real feeling about it. And so this was really trying to get people to a set of tools they could use to sort of master or at least get a handle on the craft.
Right. I can't remember, was it an improv tip or something I read for free? But you were saying something about like when
now I know why improvisers aren't making money.
Yeah.
Miles Stroth.
Because I stole. Actually, I think you're allowed to read like a chapter or something for free.
Yeah. Oh yes. Of course.
But it was something about basically when someone said something to you on stage, you had like 12 steps.
The 4-step process.
The 4-step process. Mm-hmm. Which I was reading it and I'm like, oh, this all makes sense. And what I was thinking, because I teach similarly, I teach, the position play, and when someone says something to you, they're telling you your position in the scene type and all that. Sure. But what I've learned, and I'm sure you know this already, is that like those steps, they seem impossible when you read them. Like I was reading them going, I can't do all these steps, except that we all do them already.
Yes.
Right? The one thing I think the training is off stage, and on stage you play.
Absolutely, 100%. It is the difference between doing I always think of it. I tell people all the time that because I talk about improv all the time, is that learning how to improvise is like learning how to fight. And so you need to have very good basic technique. You need to know how to set your feet, you know how to hold your hands, you need to know how to turn your hip, all these basic things, so that when you get into a fight, you let all of that go and you sort of do all that stuff instinctually. But at the time when you're learning it, we're doing everything on purpose, right? We're doing everything we're sort of trying to forge these new habits, forge these new ways of thinking and reacting and doing things. So in class, we're pushing people towards this or towards that, or giving them steps that they are sort of like consciously working their way through in hopes that, or sort of in the pursuit of internalizing that, so that you said, like you said, now we sort of do it automatically. We do these things automatically, and that's really what we're striving for. And sort of what I was striving for with the book was these things that I think when we were learning improv, at least when I was, it was like the teacher sort of pushing us in this way, and myself too when I started teaching, pushing us this way and that way towards experiences that we hopefully sort of resonated with and could sort of use as directions back towards this feeling. But there's a certain thing that underlies that. What makes that experience? Well, it means this 4-step process. That makes this part of the experience. Or you reacting this way, sort of taking what your partner says and reacting back to them. That is this sort of the process. That it is not as mysterious or ephemeral as some people want to make it. You know what I'm saying? I think there are some very specific things that we can do that make scenes better.
Absolutely. And it's funny, I'm thinking, it seems to me that you and I are in similar places as far as where we're at in our process, as far as examining it. One of the things I think that happens, and you can tell me what you think of this. I think at some point we got good, right? We got to a place
Totally excellent.
But like at some point you got to a place where you were a good improviser. And to me, it's like, well, because we weren't good, then we got good. What changed?
Yes.
And to me, I think what happens for most people is what happens, you did it for a long time, and you were successful in moments because you were recognizing things that you didn't recognize before.
Yes.
And I think what you and I are both trying to do is basically break it down to, here's what we're recognizing.
Yes, 100%, Miles. I often tell my students that at the end of level 1, the biggest thing that separates me from those students who are graduating level 1 is experience. I have like almost 30 years in the game. So it's like, it's not that we're doing it differently. We're doing it the same way. I'm just doing it with 30 years of experience behind me. You know what I'm saying? And so like, it's so fun. It's so funny. That's totally true. Like when we're watching, I was talking to Pat Finn about this today, is that when you're watching a scene and you see like, well, obviously that's the tag out to that. And they're like, what? Where'd you come up with that? I'm like, cause it's the most obvious thing. It's right there in the scene. But right. You're recognizing it because you sort of recognize like fertile territory because you've mistaken it 1,000 times. You're like, oh, right. I fucking fucked this up 1,000 times. I'm finally, now I get it right more than I get it wrong, And yes, the recognition of that, or recognition of roads that are sort of more fruitful and stuff is definitely sort of something that comes with experience, for sure.
Yeah, and I think that the challenge for us as teachers really is basically, because tell us a lot of things like, well, this is obviously what you do because it's obvious, right? But then sort of take a pause and go, wait a minute, why is that obvious to me?
Yes, for sure.
What is it that I'm seeing? Because I know, like, I've seen some people teach something like, look, just pick up a cup and that should give you your whole character. And I'm like, man, you can't tell that to a student. You can't tell that to a beginning student because I know what you're saying, but a beginning student doesn't, because no, the way you hold the cup informs you of who your character likely is and where they are. What's your emotional reaction? I know the whole process you're going through, but you can't just skip. Hey, pick up a cup and you're done.
Right.
You have to. The challenge to me, it's our own exploration of ourselves. It's like, what is it I'm recognizing? What else am I recognizing?
That's totally what I try to do in the book and in my teaching, is try to sort of articulate consciously the things that we're doing, like subconsciously. Do you know what I'm saying? The things we've internalized now, I'm trying to externalize. Like, okay, that's obvious because then you could this and that, and this is why. And so that's, yes, 100%. I totally agree, because that's the thing. You're trying to sort of, you're trying to communicate the thing that makes your experience valuable, sort of, do you know?
Right. So I was thinking, you mentioned the martial art analogy. I always like that analogy. I always thought that the simple way I saw was like you train them like in martial arts, but then like improv is a street fight.
Totally.
Right.
100%. All of that goes out the window.
Yeah.
You need to do whatever you can do to make that scene successful, to work, to move forward. And sometimes, I'll be the first one to admit, you will do the exact opposite of everything you learned or everything that I taught or whatever, and it's going to kill.
You have to have that freedom.
You have to have that freedom. But when you don't get lightning in a bottle, you need to have some technique to rely on that's going to get you to that moment, that's going to sustain you to that.
Right. A way to analyze, you need a way to analyze the work you have.
That's so true, because a lot of times I see, like, one time I went to teach at this college, and they were like running a workshop, and I was kind of like watching their workshop, and I was like, you guys don't. It was really weird to me, because it's like they didn't have like an underlying philosophy of like what of the work they were doing. So it's like each note, the notes they were giving were just about the exact scene that just happened, applicable to nothing in the future.
Right.
So if you're ever in the scene again where an alligator comes in to buy a cup of coffee, you're golden. Otherwise, disregard everything I'm saying, because it doesn't have any, you know, you have to have some sort of like mechanistic understanding of what that thing is to apply that to the future of like, oh, this is a teachable moment that we can abstract out of this and use in other situations.
That's something I've been trying to push. I'm currently pushing on a class I have. It's like just making them, as simple as it sounds, just think about improv. It's just like, you know, sit somewhere and just think about a scene. Because that's, I mean, as far as like, because what it takes to get better is time and stage time and thinking about it and practicing. But literally just thinking about it is working the same parts of your brain that you're going to use on stage.
I'll say on that note really quick, I know for myself, that's 100% true. When I was in Chicago, when I was just got on a Herald team and we would sort of do shows, and most of them were terrible, that I would always like walk home. I didn't live that far, but I would walk rather than take a taxi or elevator. I would just walk and just like that 10, 15 minutes, just sort of go over the show and think about like what worked and what didn't work and why, and, you know, just really try to process that, you know. And I think that really, I agree. I think that really made a difference, because it's not like, it's like anything you want to become successful at. You do it and then you sort of say, oh, what worked and what didn't work and whatever. But I think a lot of times people are just like, you know, just whatever. Well, I guess we'll try again next time, like without any sort of thought about it. If you really want to get good at it, I think you're right. You need to think about it. You need to sort of really have this sort of analytical mind about like what worked, what didn't, and why.
I think it's helpful to people too, just because it busts a kind of myth, which is because I know there's a lot of thinking in the community. It's like what you need is that stage time. You need that precious stage time to get better. That's how you get better, stage time. And I'm just like, I thought about it and I was like, well, let's see. It took me about, you know, maybe 8 years to get good, right?
Sure.
Now, as far as stage time, what we're talking about is shows, show time, stage time, live time. And in those 8 years, the first 4 years, I didn't do any shows, right? No, just taking classes and watching shows. Sure. Didn't do any shows. And then when the family actually got going, we did maybe one show a week, right? For a couple of years. Right. So,
and then you guys were doing like 4 shows a week and killing it like crazy.
But for a short amount of time.
Yes.
My point being is that in those years, it's like if I added up all the stage time, I could probably pack it into a month, right?
Absolutely.
So if it's the stage time that made me better, I should be able to get better in a month. But it's not the stage time that made me better. It's the hanging out with people and talking with them about it and thinking about it and analyzing it.
It's the reps. It's the reps. And the reps aren't necessarily in front of an audience. And the reps aren't even necessarily external. It's internal too, like that internal work you're doing and sort of talking about it and thinking about improv. Like I think you're like me in the sense that I caught fire on improv. Like I couldn't not think about improv. So it was very easy to think about it. But yes, for sure. Think about what worked about the show and why. When you're getting notes, your coach hopefully is giving you notes of like what worked and what didn't and why. And what teachable moments can we bring forward? And then you think about that. You know, and then when you're warming up, think about those notes from before, like how can we implement them tonight, and you know that kind of thing. But I think sometimes people just come to it like baby ducks, like every day is a brand new day. Like, oh, this is my first show again. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So like, no, don't do that.
It's like I hear so much of myself and you, because I mean, you also strike me as someone basically just like you think about this all the time, right?
I do.
Oh yeah, me too. It's like
I caught fire in improv when I was in college so hard. It radically like changed the course of my life for sure. And now I literally see everything through the lens of improv. Like when I'm talking, I have 2 kids, a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, and Matt's like wrangling cats. And sometimes when they're super disagreeable, my wife is an improviser as well, we'll say, hey, can we get a little yes and up in here? What do we do? Come on, can we get a little yes and from you guys? What's happening? And they're like, no. My daughter's like a little Svengali. Like she'll come up with like scenarios. She'll be like, okay, let's say you're in the kitchen. You say, I heard a sound. Where did that sound come from? And then we'll do that. And I'll be like, hey, where'd that sound come from? She's like, no. You have to say, I heard a sound. Back to 1. Start over. So it's like, oh, Jesus. Word perfect on your crazy scenarios. We get it.
That's great. I have the same thing with my kids with one of the main things is like I'm always doing bits with my daughter, and sometimes if I go too far, all of a sudden here's the dad. I said and scene.
That's the one I have to teach my kids that and scene. Because I taught them some bits, so we do some bits, but and scene. That'll be hilarious.
I was thinking something about the martial arts thing because it was another analogy I was trying to. I don't think this is finished in my mind, but I was thinking about how getting better. It's like, did I become, more clever or faster? I don't think I became. I think incidentally you become more clever, but really, sort of like martial arts, I became more efficient. Here's like, yes. I think there are some people who are just very fast, right? And I think I've become faster, but I'm more. My improvement is really more in efficiency than speed. Yes. Mm-hmm. And I think of like a guy who's trained to block a punch, right? Mm-hmm. He recognizes the shoulder dropping or whatever it is, and the punch is coming. So he's recognizing a bunch of things. He's been trained to block it. He's going to block it, and he's going to appear very fast in doing it. As opposed to a guy who's never seen a punch before, but blocks it, that guy's fast. Mm-hmm. Right? Because he doesn't have the training. He's just that fast.
Right. In Aikido, they have a saying that sort of goes with this too, which is a beginner uses big circles and a master uses small circles. Like if you ever see someone who's like really great at Aikido, it looks like they're doing nothing and people are just flying of their own accord because they're just using tiny little movements that sort of like are just the exact thing they need to do at that moment, just exact sort of pressure or angle or whatever that sort of gets that thing to happen, And you don't have to like. And that's why you see younger teams a lot of times over talk and like there's so much going on. It's like talking.
Right.
And they can't afford a silence or they can't afford a moment, And
right.
I tell my kids all the time that not my kids, my students that to me they are in a way that to me one of the demonstrations of mastery of the form is the ability to be comfortable with and use silence.
Right.
Because that's like when you've like you're cool. It's like when you fall in love with someone and then you can just sit there in silence with them for a moment. Like it's just like you just can chill.
One of the things I like the common mistakes. Like if someone starts a scene and the other person in the scene like doesn't get it, they think it's like, oh my God, they said something and I don't know the game of the scene. I don't know what's going on, and it's like it's like it's not that you didn't get it. They didn't say it yet, right? Just relax. Right. Relax and wait a second. Right. They'll say something else, right. And then you'll probably get it.
And react to what you do know. Like react to what you're like. It's like I think a lot of people are outwardly focused on like, this mysterious game of the scene. I've discovered like a fucking treasure map and where's that unicorn at? I gotta find it. Whatever. It's like it's a lot more in your control. I think.
So I keep going back to how we view the game of the scene. Like currently, it's funny because like I tend to say everything like it's been true for 1,000 years. But it really is, it's always changing. Like the way I teach now is different than the way I taught, 2 years ago. Because it has to be that, otherwise you'd stop. But like to me, like one of the most significant things about the game of the scene is really that to me it's built into the scene. Meaning, like I see scenes as occurring in types, and one is like a straight absurd scene, where it's like I'm doing something crazy and you're saying that's crazy, you're an idiot. Now the game of that scene is that I'm absurd and you're straight. That's always going to be the game of that scene. The details are going to make it.
Sure.
It can go on. There can be a billion different scenes like that, but that's always going to be the game. And I think that's the whole. There's this thing out there like the game of the scene is something that's out there or you have to find it. I'm like, no, it's in the scene.
Right. I agree. I think I have spent a lot of years searching for the game of the scene. And I remember how frustrating it was, especially when we were in Chicago, how frustrating it was trying to figure that out and find that and like, what is the game? How do I find the game? And then, that just changed my view of it.
What do you think the game of the scene is?
I think it's your character and my character rubbing up against each other. Because your character has a game that he plays, I have a game that I play, and then those two things rubbing up against each other, that's the game of that scene. I always use the Friends example. Like everyone in Friends has a really clear archetype. Like Ross is the nerdy one, Joey's the dumb one, Chandler's the sarcastic one, Monica's a control freak, Rachel's the princess, and Phoebe's the the ditzy one or the spacey one, you know, and that's all they do for like 10 years. That's all they do. And so each scene is basically two of those ideas in a situation. That's the triangle of the scene. Like it's Ross, the nerdy one, and Joey, the dumb one, renewing their driver's licenses. So it's like those two guys rubbing up against each other. That creates the game of that scene. And that's a different scene than Ross and Chandler renewing their driver's license, because their games rub up against each other in a different way.
All right, I think I agree with the way to me, like the game of those scenes, to me that is what I would call a character-driven scene. You're talking about archetypical characters,
Sure.
right? And basically, what's built in to all those scenes is allow your archetype or your character to perceive the world, to explore the world.
Yes.
And that's all you have to do. And there's the game of the scene.
That's very much it. Yeah.
It's so easy. It's so easy now.
It is improv in a lot of ways is the process of simplifying, stripping away a lot of bad habits and sort of getting down to just that simple thing. Like it's like usually people fail not by doing too little, but by doing too much.
Right. Oh yeah, absolutely.
And it's like just less. I say this in class all the time. I like less. Just what you're doing, but less. And then just get down to the simple core thing of what it really is, and just do that.
All right, I forgot to do this last week. I definitely want to get to it this week. Was get some of these questions that came in through the internet, or people wrote them on their way into the theater today.
Great.
What is the end goal for MSW now? That's for me. I apparently to rule the world and to heal it. And by the way, I'll say it now. Just that makes me think of it. We have a name for the theater finally. After months of just trying to, we're going to call it Hammerstone Theater. So that's going to be the name of the theater.
You heard it here first.
These are old questions.
Oh, okay.
All right, here's fun. I don't know. What is your best memory with each other on stage?
Oh my gosh, our best memory on stage.
With each other.
With each other.
So we both have to have been on that. We both were on stage at some point.
I would say probably for me, doing like Dynamite Fun Nest. Like when Sharna called me. This is like, can I just set the stage for this a little bit? Sure. So when I was in Chicago, at the time, there was really one team to rule them all. And that was the family, the team that Miles was on. And they were so good that they made me mad. Like, I would leave the show and be like, God damn it. Fuck, that was so, God damn, that show was good. Fucking shit. I'd be so fucking mad that it was so good. And just like, and also this sort of ennui of like, oh, but I'll never play with those guys. And just like this sort of, so then one night, mysteriously, Adam McKay had gotten into Second City and was working a lot and this sort of thing. And so Sharna Halpern called me and said, do you want to play in Dynamite Fun Nest? Which is basically like saying like, hey, Little League guy, do you want to go play with the Yankees? And I was like, yes, I'll be there. And so I show up and everyone's like casual and cool and I've got a tie on. It was clearly like my fucking first day of school, you know? And I was clearly the new guy and Neil was like, hey, what's up? It's like, Sharna said I should come and play with you guys tonight. Okay, like whatever. But I remember just doing those shows, like what a rush it was and how fun it was doing those shows. We were doing 3 forms. We were doing the movie, we were doing the Impressionist horror, and we were doing the deconstruction, right? I think, or Harold, maybe.
I think the first thing we called it a check-in expansion, which was really someone would talk about their week, and then we do a deconstruction, basically following it.
Yeah. Yes.
And then the horror and the movie.
The Impressionist horror. Yeah.
I'm trying to think. I don't remember playing a lot with you. I remember. I mean, my favorite thing watching you on stage is speed. You guys were actually, I mean, I remember back then, the Tribe was the team he was on back in the day, and they used to do the movie. And I remember watching it going, they're faster than us. And they're all in suits. But you guys were just crazy fast. And you still are. I mean, I see you on stage, and it's like you hear something, it's like, all right, this, and this. It's really fun to watch. It's funny. I also think these questions I have, I just went through a few of them. These are from the first week we did this, so these are old questions.
Oh my goodness!
So if we could actually, anyone here have a question?
Gosh, from the audience,
right there.
Great. Hi, what's your name? Alyssa.
Hi. So I'm one of those enterprises where I'm very analytical.
Yes.
I read a lot about it. I talk a lot about it. I dissect things after shows.
Great.
But then when I'm on stage, it's all up in my head.
Yeah.
So how do you find? I mean, it's so easy to be like, well, then just let it go.
Sure.
Like it's super easy to say that. But I guess for me, like I'm having a hard time finding that balance of like keeping all of that there and letting it. Does that make sense?
Totally. I'll say two things about that. One is, I think, Picasso had these 3 rules of art, which were 1, learn all the rules. 2, practice it until you can do it perfectly by the rules. And then 3, break all the rules or let it all go, right? So you're sort of like in that second stage where everything's sort of still there and it's like everything has like, oh, this is all like pictures and diagrams and like all that stuff. I totally get that. Just keep at it. Just keep in that phase, embrace that phase. It will internalize and seep into your bones, and eventually you'll be able to let it go more and more. One way I think that is super helpful to help you let it go is focus on your partner. If you focus on your brain can really only focus on one thing at a time, really. If we seem like we're focusing on more than one thing at a time, we're focusing on several things in sequence, one at a time, right? So in a scene, if I focus on my partner, then I can't be focused on me. I can't be in my head. I'm focused on them and facilitating them. Do you know what I'm saying? And so I think that takes some of the out of it because you're not focusing on yourself and like, oh, what do I do? And I'm just focusing on my partner. And then the second part of that is say something about what they just said. That keeps you in the moment and that keeps you sort of other focused. And that I think that may help. Does that seem practical and doable?
Yeah.
Try it out for size. See what you think.
I think it's also like when you're doing something that annoys you, right? Yeah. You get on stage and you're thinking, right? You get on stage and you're thinking, and analyze that. Mainly, it's like, oh, that annoys me, and every time you do it, it's going to annoy you, and it's not going to help you, and that's going to start pissing you off, to the point where eventually, because in my span, it always seemed like I'd think a lot. And work on it and work on it and work on it and try and get better and not get better and get on stage and think. And look, I'm doing all this thinking. I'm trying to get better. Why aren't I getting better? And usually after about 2 years of that, I would have a moment where I'd just say, fuck it. I'm not doing this anymore. Fuck this shit. I can't do it. I'm just going to get on stage and do whatever the fuck because fuck this shit. And that night I would have the best show I've had. Right? And it's because it's funny. And as far as thinking on stage, it took me until like 5 years ago to stop really thinking on stage, because it doesn't really help you, and especially because what you're talking about is like you're thinking instead of playing, right? And just is it helping? No. So why do I keep doing it? I don't know. Yeah, but you do. I mean, you're thinking because it's your mind is a useful thing. Thinking is a safe place, right? And you don't really want to be in a safe place up here. I mean, you want to be in a place where shit just spills out and you chase it and you have fun, right? And the thing you recognize is the training is off stage. Me and this one right here train like crazy mentally, right? But then we let it all go when we play, right? We're just, and you've seen me play enough where it's like, it's just silly. Some of it's just nonsense, right? Because that's all it has to be sometimes. And thinking on stage just it'll kill you. That's what I got on that.
Yeah.
I think that's a great question.
Does that seem helpful?
Yeah, back there.
Yeah, I don't know if you've answered this question in the past, but I've heard a few times you just mentioned that you just sit around and think about improv. What's this? I don't really know what that means. Like, what specifically do you think? But do you think about like this is a fun way to initiate, or do you like go through whole scenes in your head?
What's funny to me is like it's like you do know the answer to this question, and it's so funny to me. It's so many times the answer to an improv question is like in the question, like how do you think about improv? Like, well, what do I know about improv? I think about that. That's it. I mean, basically, what do you know about improv? You think about that. What have I seen? I think about that. Right? I just think about it. It's like if I wanted to think about flowers, I would think about, well, what kind of flowers have I seen? What kind of smells can I remember? I would just think about it, right? And just the thinking about it is the work.
Yeah, and I think that's true. I mean, just sort of, like, I would oftentimes think like retrospectively about a show that just happened, sort of like, as I said, breaking it down, but also coming to see shows that are good and coming to see shows that maybe aren't as good, because you get to see like all the choices that people are making. That's for me one of the great things about when we were at the I.O. in Chicago, is that we could go see shows for free, and I was there like, I was on, like I said, I was on fire for it, so I was there like 6 nights a week. Like seeing shows, I would look at my girlfriend and be like, "What do you want to do tonight? You want to go to the I.O.? Okay, great." And then we like run over, like finally, And so, but we just see so many shows, and just like seeing what were like, just watching people and just sort of like the choices they would make, and sort of the routes they would take, and then sort of like thinking about that, I'm like, "Oh, look at that! That's that." Because I think when you watch it as just an audience member, as a civilian or whatever, you just let it wash over you, as you should. Just let it wash over you as an experience. But when you're watching it as another improviser, you should really be thinking about it and like, what made that work, or what was that choice, or where did that come from, and talking to that, if you can talk to that person after, what were you thinking when that happened, or whatever, that sort of thing. But yeah, I think anything, like I said, everything in my life sort of eventually sort of, if I talk about it for more than a minute, it comes back to improv. So I sort of see everything that way, but yeah, just scenes that I've seen or done, or what if I initiated that way, or what about this, or I'll read an article about it, or I'll see a video about it, and and that gets me thinking. I think about that for a little while, and
it isn't like there's like, well, here's the things you have to think about, right? Because basically, as you were asking the question, you're like, what? So I just think about a scene and what might happen? Yeah, sure, do that.
Totally.
I think about a suggestion and what I might do. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
But basically, anything you can imagine that might happen is good thinking.
Yeah, there's an exercise that I tell students that come to class often, like, oh, it's only once a week. What do I do in the meantime? And I sort of give them this exercise that I call the solo practice exercise, which is give yourself a big playable gift. Like, oh, if someone said to me, like, if I said to someone, oh, you're greedy, that could be a big playable gift. And if someone said that to me, how could I play that? Oh, I could have a big sack that has a $sign on it. I could grab all the donuts in the break room. I could just be greedy for their attention and whatever. It's just like trying things out, like flexing those muscles a little bit of like, just not that you're planning things ahead or sort of like writing a list, but just sort of like getting used to the idea of like getting a gift and like exploring the world, So all kinds of different ways to think about it.
It's funny, 'cause I bet if you watch improv, 'cause I know this is true of me. I bet if you watch improv and you see something like, oh, I wish I could do that better. I wish I could do that better.
Sure.
Then it's like, all right, now you know what to work on. Now you know what to think about.
There are some people, I know some people have taken the tack where they have a favorite player and they'll watch that person all the time, and sort of like suck everything they can out of that person. And they're like, okay, I think I've got a handle on that. And they sort of go to another person. Dell used to say, you call it plagiarism, I call it research. Find someone great and steal from them.
I think that's all we have.
Oh my gosh.
Time for?
Yeah, we got 33 minutes.
Can we answer one more question?
One more question, sure.
Yeah.
That sort of plays into what I'd like to know, which is how do you develop your individual voice, or like the way a certain person plays? How do you sort of like get to the point where you have that particular personality? I guess.
It's funny because I don't even know, because I don't think of it like that. To me, it's like, how do I develop my voice? I develop me. It's like, because I am basically on stage, I'm my reaction, and my reaction is based on who I've made myself. So my voice comes from a lifetime of making me, and no matter who you are, you're already enough, right? If you see yourself lacking in some way, then you'll probably correct it, right? But there's not like I'm not me trying to be someone else, trying to make me into someone else. I don't think that would make any sense.
Yes, I agree. And I think one of the things that sort of caught me on fire about improv when I first saw it was the thing that you bring to it is you. Like everything you've said or thought or done or experienced in your life, that's what you bring to it. Everything. And so for me, improv is the medium. It's like learning how to paint. If you can learn how to mix the paint and apply it to the canvas, then you can paint anything you want, and your artistic vision comes through that. So I think it's like the same thing with improv. If you sort of learn the basics, the craft of improv, like how to do a scene, then once you sort of get that down and you're not just trying to keep your fucking head above water and not drown in the scene, then you have a chance to start just letting yourself out. And just like like Miles says, you are enough. You have that point of view. But by the same token, most of the improvisers I know are some of the smartest people I know. Well-rounded, well-read, interested, curious. They just get involved in things. They read about things. They sort of talk about things, and it's fun to talk to them because they have some life experiences or curiosity about stuff. So put stuff in the tank. Put stuff in the tank that you can use. Del for me was a fucking genius. He would you'd ask him a question, and be like, well, I think there's a book, and he would quote a page of a book. You'd be like, motherfucker. He'd super deep and super smart about stuff. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, I think like Miles said, if you feel like you're lacking in some way, just work on that, experience that. But improv is the medium that lets you let yourself out. And the more you simplify that, the clearer that lens gets, and the more your particular point of view can come through.
This reminds me very briefly, I remember the idea of putting stuff in the tank, meaning filling your mind with wonderful things and information. And it's something my mother used to say to me. Well, here we go. Which was, basically, in reference to that, if you were stranded on a desert island, how rich would you be? Because all you would have is what's in your mind. And so something you should be doing in life is constantly trying to make yourself rich in that way. I think we should now do a set.